7:30. Call the meeting to order at 7:30 p.m. Members of the council, this is a work session. We run the work sessions informally, but we still are nominally under the rules of order. Council members, are there any changes needed to the agenda, or are there any conflicts of interest for any agenda items that you need to let us know about?
I have neither.
Okay, silence from the rest of you. Then I'm going to assume that we will move forward with this agenda, and we can, of course, add items under new business or unfinished business when we get to that point. So let's move on to presentations. First presentation is Tree Box Rain Garden Conversion, Laura Robinson, Neighborhood Design Center.
Yes, I actually think that Laverne Peaks is going to introduce this presentation, Mr. Mayor.
Very good.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. A little back on the backstory on the Rain Garden project. It was actually funded in fiscal year 2024 in the CIP, initially with ARPA funds, and later with the grant from the County Stormwater Stewardship Program administered by Chesapeake Bay Trust. As stated in the CIP, the project is in the town's strategic plan to mitigate flooding in residential areas and improve water quality, where rain gardens in the tree box area in the public right-of-way will have a measurable impact. So the tree box is the area between the curb and the sidewalk. In the project description, staff proposed the development of criteria to identify and evaluate locations best suited for rain gardens as a necessary first step in developing the program. A second necessary step is to obtain a plant palette to guide the design of the rain gardens. So staff contracted with the Neighborhood Design Center to develop the criteria and plant palette. And Laura Robinson from the Neighborhood Design Center is here to talk a little bit about the findings and the project. Laura?
Thank you so much, Laverne. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. And I can share my screen if that's easier and make sure that the whole presentation is in full view. Or I'm fine with doing it this way too.
Yeah, I believe that we will control the screen.
Okay, no problem. As Laverne said, I'm Laura Robinson from the Neighborhood Design Center. We're a nonprofit. We work out of Hyattsville, and we work all throughout the county. And we support projects with communities, municipalities, and different organizations to support projects and build visions in the built environment. And so I'm the programs director for landscape design and environmental resilience. So my team worked on this project to see what we can do in terms of converting tree boxes or the right-of-way in Riverdale Park into rain gardens. And as Laverne said, this was funded through a couple different grants. And this is really just the first part of this project, where we wanted to look at the feasibility if this was a possibility for the town of Riverdale Park. So if you don't mind scrolling down a little bit. And we've had a long history working with Riverdale Park on a lot of projects, particularly around tree planting. And we recently had Riverdale Park's Public Works team and Ivy Lewis participate in a grant that we had for municipalities to learn more about BMP, so best management practices around stormwater maintenance. And so we did a lot of training with the crew members. And so this is really where this conversation started, is how Ivy mentioned that, some residents, because we know that a lot of the Riverdale Park residents are really eco-conscious and focused on sustainability and environmental resilience, particularly in the face of climate change. That what if this strip of grass in most cases could be something that's actually benefiting the environment? And I think some text might be missing from this, but that's okay. But so the idea was that we wanted to do a feasibility study to understand where exactly these rain gardens could go throughout Riverdale Park. And we were particularly focused on residential areas. So there are commercial areas, but we were focusing on residential areas so that this could be a benefit for residents, you know, so not just treating stormwater, but adding beautification as well. And if you scroll down, so we did a site prioritization analysis by looking at different layers in the environment, as well as some socioeconomic factors. If you keep going. So we really wanted to prioritize the ways that this could be environmentally conscious, consider the existing structures and the existing environment, but also focus on equity to make sure that, you know, implementing these resources and this major benefit for the town was being distributed equally across the different parts of Riverdale Park. So we really focused on tree canopy, the topography of the site. We looked at the floodplain and what's currently happening with storm conveyance. And then we factored in that socioeconomic factor for equity. If you keep scrolling. So as you can see, this layer is looking at tree canopy. And so we know that tree canopy supports a lot of stormwater uptake and interception. And actually, the areas with less tree canopy are better suited for sites for these rain garden installations because we wouldn't be interacting with existing trees. And it also can kind of pinpoint areas that might need more support in the areas of stormwater management. Next slide, and I'll try to go through these quickly. So topography is obviously a big factor. As you can see, the more dense areas are going to be areas where there's a steeper slope, and we know that steeper slope will increase the velocity of stormwater. So that's really increasing the storm flow, potential for erosion, and then potential for infrastructure failure. So that's when you might have instances of storm drains getting overloaded and flooding and things like that. Next slide. And so this one is a little interesting. We looked at the floodplain, that hydro line, that blue line is going to be those existing stream areas. And that pink line is actually an analysis with GIS to essentially aggregate those contours that you just saw to try to understand exactly where the conveyance is happening. So that we can figure out which areas might be having a concentrated area before it reaches those hydro lines. And also to remember, we can't actually put BMPs in the floodplain. It sounds like that might be exactly where you would want to put it because the areas might be flooding. But when areas are in the floodplain, when they get flooded, it actually causes the infrastructure to fail. So that's another area that we actually have to avoid. But by picking up all of that stormwater ahead of where, before it reaches the river or any of those other areas, we can actually support the system as a whole and try to reduce that flooding. Next slide. And these are just your existing storm drains and structures. So it's important to for us to know where those are so that as we add in new infrastructure, a lot of rain gardens at this capacity dealing with the flow from roads will need an under drain. So we'll need to actually be connected in to the existing structure. So this is another layer that we're looking at to make sure that we're looking at areas that can be close to those as well. Next slide. And then here's the map of low to moderate income. As you can see, the southeast corner is where you have a higher percentage of residents with lower income. And so we just want to make sure that we're also factoring this in to make sure that those that might be bearing a heavier burden of environmental justice concerns also have access to this resource that will be supporting their environment. So all of those together at the next slide looks like a big, colorful gobbledygook mess. But what we did is we looked at all of all of those layers to understand where all of those factors were overlapping, what areas we had to try to stay away from. And we'll get into it more in a little bit, but you can see a few zones kind of emerge as the ones that we can focus on. So if you scroll down, these are those main points that we wanted to factor in as we're looking for the spots that would be good for a rain garden. So they have to be outside of that floodplain. They have to be close enough to connect into the existing drain inlets. So the existing conveyance system. We want to avoid large trees. So that's one thing that if we have large trees in the right of way, if we are putting in a rain garden, we're impacting the root system, and that can be terrible for those trees. So we really want to make sure we're not impacting those existing trees, which are already providing so many good benefits. So obviously we're staying within the public right of way, so we're not putting these on residential property or commercial property. And we have to make sure we're looking for areas that are the right size and considering the existing topography. And we really want to prioritize those community benefits. So next slide. So these are the 4 zones that we were able to find out of the map that really looked at all of those different factors. And the goal was that they were not all in the same area, but again, with that floodplain, that's kind of, you can see bisecting the town a little bit, obviously the river, that made it a little difficult to find those areas that had all of those different priority points. So we can scroll through these quickly if you want to look at a little closer in on the potential rain garden locations. And so one thing to, and you can just scroll through if you want to look at this one that shows all of the different potential spots. And here we have a little bit closer. So here you can see Riverdale Road, Queensbury Road. And something to note that these are just proposed locations. This is not what the exact size would be. These are just areas noted that could be a good potential spot. So zone 2, Oliver Street between Baltimore Ave and Rhode Island Ave. And as you can see, they're trying to connect into nearby existing infrastructure as well as with where those major conveyance areas are, as well as the existing topography. So here's another zone. And if we move on to zone 4, which is, I believe, the last one, which is the one on the other side of the river, this one on Greenway Drive actually has there's a pretty large area and it is close to the floodplain. So we do need to make sure that the floodplain hasn't changed, but this could be a really great demonstration garden because of the capacity of it. Plus there's a lot of right-of-way space. So this would be a great one to like actually really capture a lot of stormwater, especially given the topography of this area that's a little bit steeper and the known flooding instances in this area. So in terms of recommendations for how these BMPs could work, there are a few different types of bioretention that we could do for street side bioretention. And if you scroll down, we'll look at a few factors. So the kind of classic way is to convert the tree box into a bioretention. So it's just that already planted area. If it's big enough, you can do this. And this is kind of the lowest intervention option because you're not going into the road at all. If you move down to the next one, here's another one, which would actually keep a little bit of a sidewalk on the edge. So rather than have a bioretention that goes from the curb straight up to the sidewalk, you'd still kind of have a sidewalk that goes around it. So again, you'll need even more space to make sure that you can do this. And it might not be possible in all of the roadway conditions, but it could be an option if you want to keep that sidewalk access. The next option is a curb extension. So this might be best for an area that doesn't quite have enough space just in the right of way, or if you want to get more capacity, and so you do a little bit of a bump out. This one, of course, might affect the traffic flow or parking because you're going into the road a bit, but you're increasing the capacity, and bump outs have been known to slow traffic as well. So there's kind of another added benefit with that one. And the next one, the final option, well, I didn't even include the final option. The final option would be to fully do it in the road, which we actually didn't include because we didn't think that there would actually be an instance in Riverdale Park that would have quite wide enough to be able to do that without taking out a whole lane of traffic. So that's why that one's stuck in there. So the next things that we need to think about are utilities, soil evaluation, and size. So now that we have these prioritized spots that could be best for BMP, the town can factor in which areas they think are best to focus on, how many BMPs they want to do. And these are the next things that we need to look at to be able to install and test out those sites. So if you keep scrolling. So utilities are obviously important. We're going to avoid all of those. So sub-utility testing needs to happen at each of those sites. Next, we have soil testing. So soil evaluation is really key. In most instances in our area, because we're such a developed urban area, our soil is pretty bad. It means that water is not going to percolate through. You might often see standing water, and that's because the ground is just not supportive of having that water drain through. So soil testing needs to happen. Doesn't mean that we can't do a rain garden there. It just means that we'd have to amend the soil if the soil comes back as not particularly great in terms of percolation. And which is again key to being able to get close to existing infrastructure. You can keep going. And then sizing, of course, is important. And so this is where you'll want to understand the conditions and the size of a rain garden that you can get with the amount of water coming off of the street, and ensure that you've got the appropriate volume for the surface flow and as for all of the plants and things that will go in it. Let's see. We included a maintenance plan. We don't have to go through all of this, but and actually the crew is already well versed in this because they went through the training program, and we have another training program through a NIFWIF grant that the crew will be able to participate in again. But we have this maintenance schedule that the crew can use to be able to make sure that these are all functioning once implemented. Next. This is a sample plant plan and palette. It can obviously shift, but these are plants that we recommend in the area and for rain gardens that have seasonal value. They're good for birds, they're good for bees, and they're great in, they're all native, and they're great for absorbing that stormwater and handling drought as well. Let's see, we included a diagram for how to lay out all of these different plants as well once you have them in a bioretention setting. So you want plants that can tolerate drought at the top that are maybe not going to have as much water, and then at the lowest point you're going to want plants that can actually handle the wetter conditions. And let's see what we have next. Next steps. So next steps are to, one, do a little bit more planning and evaluation now that we've narrowed down some potential sites. So that means we want to understand how much budget we have, which can equate to how many pilot sites can be done, and how many different testing sites to figure out those potential locations. So once you've ID'd those final BMP locations, it's a great time to get into outreach and engagement. So having residents being able to understand what maintenance concerns there are. So again, NDC does have another grant, just like the last one that everyone participated in, and this one will actually be for residents. So there will be an opportunity for residents to understand more about Stormwater 101 and maintenance. So that factors right into this. But having outreach and engagement with the community to understand what to look for when a system might be failing. And so that's when they'll know, like, oh, actually, this plant isn't dead, it's just winter. Or in the summertime, you can say, oh my gosh, it's completely overloaded, something's clogging that drain. And that's when they know to contact their DPWT staff. And so once that outreach and engagement done, all the residents are on board, then you can get into the design build. And so that's really it. This appendix is just information from that last grant that everyone participated in. But I'd love to answer questions now if anyone has them.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Members of the council, we'll let you go first. Any questions for Ms. Robinson about the presentation?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Councilmember Foe.
I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. I love seeing the different plants and everything that we could utilize in the suggested spaces. Just thank you so much for being here this evening.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Any additional Councilmember Lingua? See, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
That I am. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming out tonight and presenting. And my question is, of the sites that you've looked at, approximately either A, square feet, or B, cubic feet, are you projecting
So
all this
that-
to be?
So that will be part of the next steps of the site investigations. So we did the higher level to narrow down those best locations. And that's why kind of at each spot, you'll notice there may be 2 to 4 options in that area. And that will be because we'll want to figure out the exact dimensions available at that site level, as well as figuring out the conveyance for that street level. So the smaller watershed of where that water is going, to be able to figure out the right size for those BMPs.
Okay, so when you were looking at these sites and, you know, what could potentially go in, you didn't come up with like a ballpark type of number?
Well, so since we don't actually know how many pilot sites we'll be doing, we didn't. I mean, I can always come back and calculate an estimate, but it really is high level in terms of the sizing, so we don't really have an accurate number for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Yang, go ahead.
Good. I appreciate the presentation and think it's a fantastic idea. My question's around twofold. One, is the best way to think of this is like any spot that we can find that makes sense is worth doing, or is there like we'll get the most bang for our buck if we hit X amount of square footage or X amount of rain gardens? So my first question. And then two, you mentioned that one area that might be a good test pilot. Is that because this is something that we need to like see if it works for us? Like, I'm just curious, what would be sort of testing there? Would just be like testing out the design or the location? And so those are my two questions.
That's a great question. So your first question is about like how many or which ones to prioritize. And truly, if you could get them in on every street, I think you should. The reality is that the existing conditions wouldn't allow for that, but not every single bit of every street needs to be converted, because the reality is that some of them won't be capturing and treating just based on the way that the roads are laid out and the way that the stormwater flows, if that makes sense. So that's why that's why we were trying to be strategic in where we were placing those, so that's like a good first list to go after. Another thing to mention is that the county and CBT now includes conservation gardens in the rain check rebate, which conservation gardens are another really great option for residents that want to have kind of the aesthetic of a rain garden or have those eco benefits. So, you know, still better than a lawn in terms of stormwater and heat island. And, you know, a conservation garden is going to have all of the native plants that are good for pollinators and local flora and fauna. So that's another option. So in terms of, you know, could you do every spot? You don't have to do a rain garden at every spot, but you could do conservation gardening everywhere as well. And then the second option, or in the second part of your question, the site that I was mentioning that's in the southeast, that one, I mentioned that that would be a good demonstration spot because it's so much larger and than the other sites. So we really did have to figure out where we could squeeze in those rain gardens because, as you all know, a lot of the streets have pretty tight right of ways and the sidewalks are already kind of small. So that strip might be too small to put in a rain garden. But that site over there on Greenway, I think, is so large that it would be a good potential site in terms of just being able to capture so much stormwater. And so that's kind of what I meant by that. And then a demonstration garden is one that can be used to demonstrate to, you know, for teaching and learning and things like that. And so that was kind of my recommendation there.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. I know in the like Riverdale Park Station community, there's been issues with like lawn care, and I think in the like tree boxes specifically, there's been some talks of like maybe wanting to do something like this.
Okay.
But then I think there was an uncertainty about like with the HOA care, but then it's like actually, you know, it's town-owned roads, and so but I noticed that it wasn't, I don't think it there are multiple maps, and so one of them I couldn't really tell if it made the cut of like prime real estate or not. But I think something in a community like that would be probably one where people would want, if they're going to do it, probably do it on most streets, you know, if at all possible, for some type of uniformity. But which I guess gets to my last point, and just in terms of like cost, is there an easy way to think about this in cost in terms of like one, you know, assuming the like existing sort of like tree box layout and not the bump out or something big, it's about X amount of dollars per, if we wanted to kind of like rough estimate cost for these?
Yes, but you'll need to do some testing first. So I think once you do that soil testing, understand what's there, you get a basic size based on what's available. Then for most of those streets that are going to have a similar existing conditions, you could estimate out that they would probably be around the same price. And having them installed all at the same time, you'd probably get a better price just based on the contractor being able to install them that way, like all at once.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Catalan, go ahead.
I have some question for Ms. Laura, and I want to know what is the lifespan of this rain garden, and how often the maintenance this rain garden, and what is the next way forward?
Yeah, so the maintenance for the rain garden is not much different than the maintenance that's happening at other landscape areas. And Ivy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea would be that the DPWT staff would be in charge of that heavy maintenance, and hopefully with some training, residents would be able to spot when there's a problem. So that would really be how maintenance would work, is that, you know, residents will hopefully know when there's something that might be failing or be a concern, and then they can flag that to the staff. And the staff will have a regular maintenance plan. I showed it very quickly in the presentation, but that's something that they'll have training on to understand at what times during the year, what they need to look for, what they need to clean out, how to replant. And, you know, of course, that planting plan will be there so that they can always replant the exact same plants again, or, you know, swap out for something if a certain species isn't working. And so in terms of next steps forward, now it would be planning, so understanding how much money the town has to be able to pick a pilot site. So this is how you'll do a little, I don't know if it's a little chicken and egg, but understanding how much money you have will help inform, how many pilot sites, but then also understanding those pilot sites will help inform how much that the cost is going to be.
Thank
And
you.
then, and then in that next phase, really making sure that residents are involved and excited and get that training and understanding, the functions of a rain garden and what to spot when there might be an issue.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any additional council questions? Looks pretty quiet. So are there any questions from other attendees of the meeting, other residents or visitors? I'm not seeing any hands or unmuted microphones. So I have just a couple of questions, and I want to clarify a few things. So the first is that the rain gardens are intended as a benefit for the watershed and not for the house that they're in front of. It's not that if you have a rain garden in front of your house, you're magically protected from flooding or poor water quality. It's that it's to benefit the watershed.
That's a great point. Yes.
And so the one in the southeast that you seem to like a lot, that one would be mainly about keeping water or buffering water to keep it out of the Anacostia and prevent further downstream flooding. So just wanted to clarify that point. The other sort of question that was raised, you made the comment earlier about not wanting to disturb established trees, and so you had to choose sites that didn't have trees in the in this space. And then I saw some of the photos later in the presentation actually had trees in the rain garden, and so I presume that this is a way that we can get more trees in. And but I know that there are a lot of trees that are not very happy to have wet roots, and so it seems that you would have to choose very carefully what trees would go in there. So can you sort of discuss any more interactions between the trees and the rain gardens that we might want to think about or keep an eye on?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So you're exactly right in that, large canopy trees, we don't want to upset their roots. It could be really detrimental to them, and it's really hard to get a really large canopy tree back. In fact, it's pretty much impossible. So we don't want to hurt existing trees, but we can plant inside and near rain gardens, and assuming that there's enough space. So there are plenty of species that actually are extremely drought tolerant, but also can handle having wet feet for a long time as well. And so we would only specify trees in or near those rain gardens that can handle those conditions. And there are a lot of trees that can do that. So this is still a great way to get trees as well. And there are so many groups right now that have free trees. And also, I'm sure the town, you all might have some free trees already, or you might have a grant already. I'm not sure.
We have lots of
Yeah.
trees that are out there, but we're always looking for ways to plant more.
Definitely.
And I guess my final question, and this was brought up by Councilmember Inyang's discussion of the Riverville Park Station, and I know probably a bit more than I want to know about the utilities up there. And so can you discussed previously about having a sort of plan around not disturbing the utilities that are in place. And if you could just go into a little bit more depth in that and, exactly how difficult is that problem, and is it different from site to site? Does it help to have better records? Because I know certain areas of town have better records than other areas do. So you could just talk a little more about that.
Yeah, so that's so generally your first step for utilities is calling this utility. And the recommendation would be to do that for all of those pilot sites, and that'll help you narrow it down at first. And then second, once you've narrowed down even a bit more, then you might want to do that sub-utility testing. And that's where they're going to find anything that could be an old remnant to something that's existing that's still in use. And the reality is that if there is something there, we really can't use spot. And so, but it does involve some trial and error, essentially. But if you have accurate documents, that can help you begin narrowing it down ahead of time. They're generally not particularly, utility companies aren't generally very helpful in terms of sharing that information.
Sure. Understood. Okay, thank you. So any additional questions from residents or members of the council, or shall we let Ms. Robinson go for the evening? Looks awfully quiet. Thank you so much. I look forward to reading this document a little bit closer and seeing how we can move forward. It's fantastic to have this information in hand and to see there's been residents who've been calling for this this project to move forward for many years, and it's good to see that we're making some good progress on it. Appreciate it.
Great, fantastic. Thank you all so much.
Okay.
Bye.
So the next presentation, according to the agenda, is fiscal year 2026 budget priorities, guidelines, and challenges.
Yes, I believe Deputy Director Jones is going to walk us through, and supplemented by Director Smith. Mr. Jones?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Electrician. So yes, tonight's presentation is on budget priorities, guidelines, and challenges. The Budget Committee has been listening to residents, council, and staff. And from this input, we have put together the budget priorities.
And Mr. Jones, hang on, the PowerPoint, there we go.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yes.
Yeah, so as we navigate through the budget process, there are a number of guidelines that the town adheres to. These will be highlighted in the presentation. And then the last part will be the number of challenges that staff have identified for the fiscal 2026 budget. Next slide, please. So yes, for fiscal year 2026 budget priorities, the Budget Committee has worked collaboratively to establish budget priorities that align with the town's values and adopted the vision and commitment statements. So there are rising expectations in the delivery of services. Staff are working to continue moving forward with the fiscal year 2026 priorities. Here we have some of the priorities that we have identified, and I will go into further detail for each of these, but the first is the Public Safety Walk, Bike, Drive, and Safety Initiative. We have enhanced service for residents, community and economic development, sustainable practices and initiatives, capital improvement project funding, and lastly, employee retention and attraction. So the first budget priority that we have pointed out is the public safety, the Walk, Bike, Drive initiative. So one of the priorities that we have here is to continue funding for the Walk, Bike, Drive Safety Initiative. The Walk, Bike, Drive initiative includes improving roads, streets, sidewalks, along with crime prevention and reduction strategies and increased community engagement. For fiscal year 2025, there was a tax increase to ensure that $350,000 was available for unspecified Walk, Bike, Drive initiatives. And of the CIP projects, roughly 2.5 million of the 6.4 that we had in fiscal year 2025 were allocated to the Walk, Bike, Drive initiative. The next priority that staff have highlighted was enhanced services for residents. Here, some of the priorities are to improve the public spaces and parks, expand community programs and events, and to continue to improve and refine communications with residents, businesses, and visitors through improved website, newsletters, social media, and other digital platforms. One of the next priorities that we have highlighted was the community and economic development. And here we look to continue support of Town of Riverdale Park businesses, as well as attract new investment. The next priority that we have highlighted is the sustainable practices and initiatives. Here we'd like to increase energy efficiency in public buildings, expand green spaces and tree planting, and lastly, promote recycling, composting, and other waste reduction programs. One thing I'd like to highlight here, this area is it called out among the various vision and commitment statements. As the town is very fortunate to have, a core group of residents that have been working to improve sustainability here. The next budget priority that we have highlighted is the capital improvement project funding. Here we'd like to prioritize road and sidewalk repairs and redesign, upgrade stormwater systems in Covina County, and lastly, complete upgrade of municipal facilities. And as I mentioned before, earlier, funding for CIP, the focus is going to continue to be the town's walk, bike, drive initiative. The last priority that we have highlighted is the employee retention and attraction. Here we'd like to highlight the workplace safety and wellness, competitive salaries and benefits, training and professional development, employee recognition and retention, technology and equipment upgrades, staffing and recruitment, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and lastly, retirement planning and succession management. So the next portion, I'm going to cover the fiscal year 2026 council, staff, and community input. So input on the fiscal year 2026 budget, it has been gathered from the following sources: mayor and council, community and town staff. And I'm going to highlight some of the input that we have received. So next slide, please. And the next one as well, please. Thank you. So the first category of staff, council, and community input is the sustainability initiatives. So the first we have is supplement to Prince George's County Rain Check rebate program. Next is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We have expansion and maintenance of tree canopy, elimination of invasive species and enhancement of native species, solar power for town buildings, and last, for the sustainability initiatives is additional sustainability programs. Next slide, please. Another category that we've broken down the input for are the community and economic development. So here we have continuing the walk, bike, drive infrastructure improvements, online support for economic development to include Town of Riverdale Park businesses. We've got restrooms in the town center, beautification of public spaces, and last, support of community garden and a food forest. So the next part of the presentation will briefly cover some of the budget guidelines for fiscal year 2026. If these seem familiar, it's because we've used these in previous budgets as well. So the first is the GFOA, which the staff utilizes, the Government Finance Officers Association. They have presented a list of guidelines that we adhere to as we put together the budget. Some of the main criteria include financial structure, policy and process, financial summaries, capital debt management, departmental information, and last is document-wide criteria. So the last part of the presentation covers some of the challenges that staff face when putting together the budget. for fiscal year 2026. So here we have 4 listed, and we'll go into detail in additional slides. But the first is limited revenue sources. Second, we have securing funds for capital improvement. Next, we have rising costs. And then last, we have grant funding. So one of the highlights for the budget challenges for this presentation are the limited revenue sources. So first is reliance on property taxes being the first challenge. The town heavily relies on property taxes, which can be stable, but also a limited source of revenue. Economic downturns or changes in property values can significantly impact the revenue stream and thus impacting the budget. Second challenge that we have is a difficulty diversifying revenue. So the town has fewer options for diversifying revenue through sales tax or other economic activities. Reliance on property taxes and then the difficulty in diversifying revenue are some of the limited revenue sources that we have. Next slide, please. The next challenge that we faced putting together a fiscal year 2026 budget involved a capital improvement program, or CIP. First is limited resources. The second is alternative funding. So grant funding is an example of alternate funding. Access to availability for state, federal, or private grants can help reduce the direct financial burden on the town, but this is also a challenge when putting together the budget. And last is PAYGO financing. So PAYGO is pay-as-you-go, a current policy. So we may have to adjust that policy in the future, moving forward as we put together the budget, as we proceed with the process of the Balancing Act. Next slide, please. So some of the other challenges that we faced is rising costs. So first is the cost of goods and services. Those continue to rise. Infrastructure maintenance is also a rising cost. And we also have employee salaries and benefits. This includes maintaining competitive salaries and benefits. Healthcare benefits are also on the rise. We have a rise in the defined benefit plan and getting that funded. And OPEB, other post-employment benefits. Another example of a rising cost. And lastly, we've identified vehicle maintenance also as a rising cost. As the town continues to improve its fleet, we also still have older vehicles which require maintenance, and there has been rising costs in maintenance that we've seen as well. So the last budget challenge that we have identified is grant funding. So first is there is more competition for grants. Town of Riverdale Park isn't the only municipality facing some challenges with funding, so there is a rise in competition there. And then lastly is just changes in administration. So with the new federal changes, we are looking at that as a challenge as well as we put together the budget. Being able to be flexible and pivot, based off of all of the changes that we encounter. So yeah, that concludes the fiscal year 2026 challenges. And that concludes the presentation as well. So any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Council members, questions, comments? Councilmember Smith, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that presentation. Mr. Jones, very informative, very helpful. I'm wondering what sort of, and you can ballpark this or respond later, but I'm wondering what sort of revenue from federal grants like are currently active, like money that we're depending on or have budgeted that we will receive them. And of course, the underlying implication there is that I'm extremely doubtful that we will receive that money since the federal government seems to be not giving anyone money at the moment. So just curious what our vulnerability is there.
Sure. As far as federal funding and reliance, at least for the current fiscal budget for fiscal year, we don't have any vulnerability there as far as reliance. This presentation is focusing more so on what we'll be facing as we put together fiscal year 2026. We have explored looking at additional revenue through grants, but to your point, with the new administration, it may prove to be difficult moving forward.
Understood. So that is an option that might not be available to us because the administration does not care about people.
And if I could just add, the grants that we seek are for the capital improvement program. And so the federal monies we receive or apply for are typically capital dollars. And there's soft costs that are covered by that, but it's all project related. And so, Mr. Jones, we already have agreements for the grants we've been awarded, I believe, correct? So
yes.
So
The
those things are in place.
right.
Well, can you say a little bit more about agreements for grants we've been awarded?
So the funds are
I don't
administered.
think with the new administration that any agreement is worth the paper it's written on. Like if we do not have the cash on hand, I doubt we're going to get it.
Yeah, well, the way the CDBG grants work, we make drawdowns after we pay. It's a reimbursement thing. And so, but those grants, the county is an entitlement jurisdiction that the county receives funds. We apply to the county. I feel fairly good about the projects that we have in process. We have a street light grant. I see Laverne has turned her camera on here. Laverne, how much do we have in outstanding federal applications?
We have a Safe Streets for All grant for $768,000. We do have a signed grant agreement on that. And I've been told by the Federal Highway Administration that those funds have already been appropriated by Congress. So we do have some of those funds available for drawdown. So it's reimbursement as well. We have a COPS hiring grant. We have $125,000. We're in the middle of that. And so we're able to draw down on that as well. Those are the federal. Some of our state grants come from federal. So we have a local government cybersecurity grant. We have 2 of those. And those are through the state from FEMA. So we have a grant agreement on one, but not the other yet. So my understanding is that once those funds have been appropriated by Congress, it's basically set aside. It cannot be taken. So what could be up in the air if we had a current application into the federal government, and then maybe that program got canceled in the middle? That's my understanding.
So thank you for that, Ms. Peaks. I think what you're referring to there is the Budget Impoundment Act of 1973 or 6. I bet Mr. Listishin probably knows that better than I do. But this administration has already said that they don't find that to be constitutional and have no intention of abiding by it. I admire the optimism of staff. I would encourage staff to do whatever we can to ensure we have cash deposit. I'm sure you're all already. Just the folks that I'm hearing from in various walks of life, be it philanthropy or international aid or infrastructure construction, all things that depend on federal funds. And I'm sure the mayor has seen this as well, and others in our town that work for the federal government. If we don't have that cash in our accounts right now, I have zero faith that we are going to ever see it. So I am very thankful that we have nimble staff that can work to plan around things, but I expect we're going to have some meetings in the future to address the shortfalls from not receiving these funds, even if they have been appropriated by Congress, or even if we do have a signed grant agreement. If we don't have the cash, I don't think we're getting it. Thank you for responding on that. I really appreciate it. Also wondering, and this may not be within the scope of this presentation, but has staff explored any more of the idea of creating a TRP foundation or some sort of C3 or other nonprofit, as we've previously sort of discussed informally?
As a matter of fact, Director Barnes and I have been meeting on that. So yes, we're continuing to discuss creating a nonprofit arm of the town for a variety of purposes. So stay tuned on that. But we've been doing more research on that. If I could add, just back on the grants, the other thing that makes me a little nervous, and this is not just federal, but it's no secret that the state has some budget problems. And if the state happens to lose federal dollars, then grants that have been previously offered but not yet drawn, they may evaporate as well. So I think there's that impact is something that causes me a little bit of concern as well, that state money may dry up. And even if we get what's been promised so far, then in the future, there's just going to be less and less. So I think the next couple of years could be a challenge.
I certainly agree, Mr. Town Manager. Thank you for that addition. And I just want to say I'm like clearly miffed about this, and my tone should not be interpreted as directed at staff. I know you guys are doing everything you can, and you will continue to, and whatever challenges come our way, we'll work and figure them out, like we always do, like you always do. So thank you for the updates.
We have a good team, sir, in Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones and Ms. Peaks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilman Ren Yang, go ahead.
Yeah, I shared some similar concerns that have already been addressed. I think the only other thing I would add was just around the I'm happy to see some of the points about our digital footprint or online presence, both for businesses as well as the town itself. I know it's been something that's been, I think, a CIP project for a while on like the website sort of refresh, redesign, as well as internal materials and resources and solutions and tools. But I think the online presence, or for businesses in particular, for economic development, I think there's a clear need. I think businesses in town sort of recognize this as well, and if left to their own devices, will try to hack something together, which I think would be a short-term fix and probably non-sustainable. And so I think there's like a role for the town to play in sort of doing this at scale, I would sort of say. And so excited that the town, it's on your radar as well. And would be curious to think of, like, are there ways in which, if funding does become an issue, are there creative ways or solutions that we can get, whether it's businesses sort of helping to like feed into it, or with the community as a way to sort of like help this be something sustainable? Because I think it's some of these resources, some of these high profile things, once they're introduced, you're almost like you're stuck with it. You can't just like have it for a couple of years and then pull it. Like it'd be more, bigger, more harm than if we just never had it at all. And so would definitely want to make sure that we have a plan around that feels sustainable and viable. But I think there's a huge opportunity. One, as a way to just highlight a lot of the businesses that already exist in town. But then when we talk about recruitment, when we talk about being able to engage existing residents and the sort of greater Riverdale Park community, I think this is like an awesome opportunity that I would even say probably would be utilized more than maybe some of the other economic grants that we have, whether it's for facades or something else, in terms of just like, if we have to think about reallocation of dollars, it might be a worthwhile conversation to have.
Thank you, Councilor Minyang. Any other council questions for Deputy Director Jones? Okay, any public comments or questions? Okay, well, I thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Appreciate the 30,000 feet view of the budget and the challenges ahead. It is going to be daunting. The issues with revenue sources and revenue quantities and many projects that we want to do, everything will have to be balanced out and planned out carefully. So thank you for this view of it, and we will be digging in at a much greater level of detail over the next few months. So thank you. Okay, that brings us to presentation number 3, fiscal year 2025 fund balances and initial year-end projections.
And we're back to Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Yes, so this presentation is another budget presentation where we will be covering the fund balance projections. So for fiscal year 2026, as a part of the budget development, we have made projections for the current fiscal year 2025 fund balance numbers. This provides an opportunity to make mid-year adjustments as we are deep into the budget process, as well as assists us in determining next year's funding levels. So yeah, the next slide I will cover the initial projections for the fiscal year 2025 that are stated in the budget, and then we have some updated projections. So for the first fund, the general fund, we had a projected amount of $3,503,177. That number has been updated for an approximation of $3,869,957. So reason for that, due to us declaring the revenue replacement in fiscal year 2024, this fund was reduced, and yeah, that increased our projection for general fund. The OPEB fund, the initial projected amount was $271,547, and we don't have any updates. That number will remain the same. For Economic Development Fund, the initial projected ending amount was $90,757. At this point, the figure that we have is $13,443. Again, this is also attributed to the Economic Development Fund revenue replacement that we did with the American Rescue Plan Act funds. So that figure has been reduced. Next is community development. We had a figure initial amount of $24,217. We have an updated figure of $42,884. The Health and Wellness Fund, we have an initial projection of $41,984. We have since then reduced that figure to $17,804. Health and Wellness, this one may go up. We are still waiting to see if we will receive any rebate, but the initial projection is that we will not. So being conservative, we have reduced that figure. The special revenue TIF admin amount, we had a figure of $230,869. The updated amount went up a little bit, $245,300. The debt service reserve also went up a little bit from the initial projected amount of $101,340 up to $115,236. And the last is the CIP. We had a projected amount of $232,747, and that figure has been updated to $994,520. And again, this fund was also affected by the American Rescue Plan Act reallocation, if you will. So those funds that would have initially been in the Economic Development Fund, those moved to CIP. And we also have some projects that we had initially projected to be completed in fiscal year 2025 that look to be pushed to fiscal year 2026. So yeah, that explains the jump there we have in the ending CIP fund balance.
And Mr. Jones, can we stay on this slide for a moment? just for my clarity and perhaps for others. So the initial projections, those were projections you made last spring for how we would end fiscal 2025 this coming June.
Correct, yeah.
And now here we are 6 months or 7 months into the year, and you're revising the projections that we made last April.
Correct, yes. So even before we begin fiscal year 2025, you know, the way that we ended 2024 also directly affects these funds. So you know, the projections, the ending balances that we put in the budget are our best guess at the time when we're putting together the budget. But, you know, if things happen in fiscal year 2024 and we end that year differently, you know, that will affect, you know, where we are in 2025. And this is really just our best guess as to where we are right now. And as we're putting together the budget, we need, you know, updated numbers in order for us to project out where we'll be in fiscal year 2026. So.
And just for reference, so I want to make sure the council has this clear. For example, in economic development, in the last couple of years, we've carried a hefty balance there. We're now projecting through our various programs and that by the end of this fiscal year, we're going to be down to $13,000. And so in order to have robust programs next year, we're going to have transfers into economic development. Is that correct, Mr. Jones?
Correct, yeah. We were able to, with the American Rescue Plan Act, the last 2 years, we were able to fund a lot of economic development through some of those funds, but again, those funds have been extinguished moving forward. So to your point, we will have to find other alternative sources to fund the Economic Development Fund.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Jones. And
So
back
the
to you,
next
sir.
slide covers the general fund history. So what we tried to illustrate here is for each of the fiscal years where the general fund.
The next slide, please.
Oh, sorry about that.
Wait, I thought you had another slide there.
There's supposed to be, wait, one up.
I don't see your general.
Oh, I think that's very odd. I don't know why that one's missing. Give me a second. Let me see if I could share my screen to share that. Give me 1 sec, please. Okay, so this is, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So yeah, so this screen right here illustrates the history of the general funds dating back to fiscal year 2020. So what we've done here is we've shown the general fund balance as well as the excess of revenue over expenditures. And the attempt here is to show everybody, you know, where we've been in 2020 all the way up to 2025's year-end projection. So for 2020, we had a revenue net expenditure amount of $1,415,000. For fiscal year 2021, that number went up to $1,685,000. For fiscal year 2022, that number jumped all the way up to $2,227,000. Fiscal year 2023 dropped down to $1,486,000. Fiscal year 2024, that amount was $990,000. And for fiscal year 2025, we have a projected amount of $850,000. So the main reason for sharing this slide is to illustrate where we've ended at the end of the fiscal year with our revenue in excess of expenditures, to show also our main CIP source for funding. So in previous years, the main sources to fund CIP has been the revenue net expenditure. Fiscal year 2023, we were at 1.4 million, and we dropped all the way down to 990,000 for fiscal year 2024. And the projected amount that we have now, which is subject to change, is around 850,000 for fiscal year 2025, which really goes to show that the funding for CIP has dropped since fiscal year 2022, and we look to continue to drop. So as we look to fund additional CIP projects, funding is beginning to get increasingly tight. And that's just something, another challenge, as I pointed out in the previous presentation, is funding for CIP continues to be a difficult challenge. So yeah, that concludes our fund balance presentation. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Council, are there questions for Deputy Director Jones on fund balances and initial year-end projections? Okay, no council questions. Are there any public questions or comments? Okay, I will say that I'm glad to see that most of the funds are going to be a little bit higher than initial expectation. It shows that our budgeting has been appropriately conservative and our spending has been appropriately controlled. So, so I appreciate very much seeing that, and I'm hopeful that perhaps our revenues will get a little bit better, and we can see an excess of revenue over under expenditures. That's better next year. We'll see. Thank you again for the presentation. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, Mayor's Report. I have been monitoring some, as best I can, the legislative activities in the State House. Attended a meeting this morning of the PGCMA Legislative Committee, and there are a few items in there that I think we need to keep an eye on. One of them is legislation that will regulate annexation, and exactly how that will change is, I believe this is being driven by the conflict between Cheverly and Bladensburg over the hospital site. And we want to make sure that that isn't resolved in a way that will limit us in the future. And it's, as I said, I'm sort of trying to keep an eye on that. Another item that was just brought up this morning is that there's apparently a piece of legislation that would allow the state to install speed cameras in areas where they were implementing a pedestrian safety plan for a state road. And Kenilworth Avenue is slated to be such an area where they will be improving pedestrian safety. And so we need to, again, keep an eye on that as to whether they will install speed cameras there that will not be under our control or our jurisdiction. So those are just the two that I'd like to bring up. I do not have much else on my report. I was out of town over last weekend, weekend before last technically, with a family emergency, and came back and dropped into the middle of the first week of the new administration, and it's been quite a week. And so I don't have much else to report, but I do feel obligated to report, given that we have elections coming up in early May, and we have a filing deadline that is a month from today, on February 27th, that after very careful consideration and consultation with family members and colleagues, that I will not be running for re-election or any public office in the May elections here in town. And the reason for this is that over the last 6 or 8 months, My job duties have gone up. My family duties have gone up. My need to attend to my own healthcare needs has gone up. And the demands of the mayor job have also gone up. And I find that I'm not doing well in any of those areas. And I don't find this personally acceptable and feel that it is best to step back from those that I can. And unfortunately, I feel that the mayor's job is the only one that I can step back from. And so I will be doing so. And I have spoken to at least one person who seems to be interested in the job, interested in running for it, and who I think will do a good job. And so I am hopeful that you will be seeing someone else seeking your signature at your door very shortly. And with that, I conclude the mayor's report. That brings us to the town manager's report. Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So let me begin by saying I respect your decision to step back. I've worked with many administrations throughout the years, and it's been a true honor and a privilege to work with you. I've never had to worry about ethical considerations or venturing into operations. You've always set the highest example, and for that, sir, I am grateful. And so is the staff team. We appreciate your leadership, and the staff team is here to serve the next mayor as the town goes through that transition. But sincerely, sir, your leadership, your concern, genuine concern for the community and for the staff team, it's beyond reproach, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. I appreciate those words.
A few other things, and I'll start with some good news. Councilmember Colon, this is news that you would be happy to hear. We continue to work with Pepco, but we have a little bit of a sliding cost on this, but it does seem we'll be able to get the street lights at Spring and 54th around the corner, as well as the street lights on our paper street of Kennedy Street and over at the new Pocket Park and Tot Lot. They first came back and told us 18,000, then they're in the high 20s. So for tonight, I'm going to say under 30. If it comes in under 20, we'll be able to just move forward. If it comes in over 20, we'll be back to the council for approval. I believe we'll be able to fund this out of some project savings from some different projects and be able to move forward. Once we have a final number, we should be able to move forward in the current fiscal year. So I think that's really good news. I was asked a short time ago by Councilmember Smith whether we're still considering some sort of a 501c3 type thing. And so Director Barnes and I are having more in-depth conversations on that. And I think it was Councilmember Inyang who talked about economic development in that. And I gave a little teaser a number of weeks ago that we're working on some things. Director Chelton has been out of the office. He's going to be out of the office until early February, or I'm sorry, the end of February. And so Director Barnes and I are the ones in development services now. And so when he comes back, he will learn that we do plan on including funds in the budget to launch an official action for a Main Street program in our town center. We believe we've reached the maturity point, if you will, as an organization, as a community, as volunteers, where we can actually sustain such an effort. And there will also be quarterly business roundtables. There's a lot of stuff that's coming. And so stay tuned on that. Some of the things will be tied to budget proposals. Other things we'll be able to do within the operating budget. and with current levels. A couple other things. Councilmember Olson is co-hosting a virtual immigration informational meeting along with Congressman Ivey and County Council Member Ivey and County Council Member Fisher. That Zoom meeting is tomorrow morning at 8:30. I believe we have information about that meeting on our social media platforms. The last thing I want to say tonight, and I'm going to stay clearly out of politics with the new administration, but I think about our residents who are being impacted, whether it's people in the transgender community who are being maligned and made to feel less than, or our immigrant community who fears for their future. And so we will continue to communicate the town's values to our residents, and to reassure our residents as best that we can that Riverdale Park as a community and as an organization is here to do what we can to honor the inherent worth and dignity of all of our residents. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Are there any questions for the Town Manager from Council? Okay, then that brings us to Council, Committee, and Ward reports. We'll start with Councilmember Smith, Ward 1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over the last couple weeks, been reminded of two things that I've always sort of held true, but seem really timely at the moment. And that is that all we have is each other, and we are all in this together. And Mr. Mayor, I think it is understandable and righteous that given those two things that you will be directing your attention and your energy to the people closest to you. After years of service to this town and the way that you have set this town up, you are leaving a legacy of care for this town. And please know that as council members, as a town, as a community, we'll always be there for anything that you need from us. I'm sure we'll see you around. You might pop into a public meeting or two. And I just want to say personally that I really appreciate your time as a colleague and a mentor and a friend. Yeah, we can't catalog the things you've done for this town. Everybody knows them. And we will be eternally grateful. I'll personally be eternally grateful and look forward to what we see from you next. And I think all of us as council members needing to step up our game to do a little bit more for the town to cover for all the work that you do. And we are happy to do that. So please, Mr. Mayor, anytime you can call on me, anything you need. And thank you for all your service to the town again. I want to thank staff for the immediate response early in the morning last week to the incident in Town Center with the WMATA bus that crashed into the Douglas Development property. Interesting how fast that thing could come down after being a public nuisance for years once a bus runs into it. Certainly condolences to the driver and their family, and glad that there weren't any significant injuries among the handful of passengers that were on board. That incident, of course, was not related to the configuration of our town center, but we do have a town center that is configured to encourage incidents, shall we say. So was really happy earlier this month to see such a strong turnout at Riverdale Elementary, along with some of the council and mayor colleagues, town manager and staff for the public meeting, information gathering around realignment of our town center. I think that's a long-term project, and hopefully all of our funding sources are secure and we'll be able to continue to do that. And it's going to be something that makes our town center a lot more safe a lot more enjoyable. Not that it isn't incredibly enjoyable already, but yeah, that intersection is a nightmare, and it'll be fantastic to see something done with it. And just to echo the comments from the town manager, anything we can do, again, all we have is each other, and we're all in this together. And that's everyone in our community. And there are folks in our community, be it immigrants, transgender folks, federal employees that are under siege right now, without much light at the end of the tunnel. And I hope, to the extent we can be, as a town, that we can be that light. And I'm committed to being that light in whatever we need to do to protect our community. Those words are kind of hollow right now without action. We'll see, I'm sure, over the weeks ahead how this new paradigm comes for our town and for our community. But I look forward to, as it is a necessity, to being there to protect those in our community. And I hope that all of our residents understand that this is a council and a staff and a town and a community that is committed to that. And that's all I have for this evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you again for all of your dedicated time that you've given to this town.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. And trust me, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not disappearing. I hope to stay quite involved. It will just not be as mayor. Councilmember Foe, Ward 2.
Mr. Mayor, you're going to return to your blog writing days, right? I told you I looked at the Cash website one time and I saw like Alan Thompson's blog towards Riverdale Park government in like 1995. I'm not prepared to summarize what the last 8 years have meant to me, Alan. I've been able to glean so much knowledge, information, friendship by proxy. I'm not ready to summarize any of this yet. I know that you must be struggling with the decision, but you've done your part. You are, when I think of public servants, I hold you so high, just based on what I've seen you do over these past 8 years. So like I said, I get emotional talking about it because not only have I got to see what you've done on behalf of these people, I've also got to see what you've done for me individually and my family. And I hold you to be remarkable. So I just want to have time to prepare my thoughts. And I just ultimately want to convey to you as a community, everyone that I can luckily represent, how highly they speak of you, and what it is that you do for this town. You've just had a remarkable career to be incredibly proud of. And I think that's how we should view this as you move to this next phase for the next year, 2 years, however long it is. I've always been so remarkably impressed with your knowledge, with your empathy, with your preparation, with your dedication. You truly are spectacular. And like I said, this is only the beginning. I want to make sure that I can truly summarize my thoughts, but I'm just proud that I've had the opportunity to work alongside you. And that is as honest as I can be. I'm too emotional to even talk about any of that other stuff, but my friend, you are whole, you are incredible, and we are so appreciative. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Lingua, Ward 3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Had a number of discussions since that night of the to discuss the redesign over there at Town Center, and I come back with a lot of people saying that they hope that between now and the springtime, when Mr. Tissue and company said that they would be back with something, or just what they've come up with, that there would be additional meeting of just where folks, it's more of a listening session and more of a interactive session with the maps that they had laid out on the tables. While it was nice that they were there, it seemed that they were more peripheral, and really there was just a missed opportunity with some community interactivity with the maps and laying down comments and queries right on there. Besides with how input was taken that night. And I hope Mr. Tissue and company would be open to such an idea, and hopefully that we could do something over again at Riverdale Elementary. So the community could have more of an opportunity to provide input. In terms of what you shared with me about your decision going forward, and I said this before to you, it's been a heck of a number of years sitting next to you, be it a fold-out aluminum chair or up on that dais. It's been a real pleasure and a real honor to be able to have that opportunity to do so. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think they were actually steel, but whatever they were was hard, cold metal. And remember it well. Councilmember Inyang, Ward 4.
Good evening. I'm gaining my voice back because I was at the game in Philadelphia yesterday, and despite my the inhabitants of my ward, I think the better team won. And on the ride back, I've been thinking a lot about champions and legends, and there's always this saying of like, oh, that person did this crazy play, they'll never have to buy another drink in town again. And when I think about what does it mean to do public service in PG County, which has been marred in scandal and controversy, and you look at not just countywide, but just literally our municipalities that neighbor us have been marred in scandal and controversy, and never had to worry about that with Riverdale Park with you, Mayor Thompson. And I think you have held the office. I think why this work is important to the highest standards. Now, I mentioned this to you when we spoke about, I wouldn't be on this council if it wasn't seeing a person living the servant leadership life that I was first drawn to when I thought about public office, 25 years ago, as a young intern in the, mayor's office in Newark, for then Mayor Booker. And I've lost that path for a while. And so seeing you embody that has been one of the great joys of my time being here. And it was how I knew that Riverdale Park is not just going to be a stop in my journey, but a destination. And so you somehow managed and juggled multiple things, the hardest working man I know, while still, representing the town in a way that I think most people who haven't really been under the hood or in the trenches with you will really understand, but we all benefit from. And so you have earned some peace in whatever form that looks like. And knowing you, I know it's going to be probably just as much into the legislative sessions of what's happening that's being passed in the House or the Senate, in the State House. It's just the next person, but whatever finds you joy and brings you joy and gives you an opportunity to embrace a new phase, looking forward to it. And I think as my colleagues have said, however we can help, please don't be a stranger. And you're just as big of a Super Bowl champion or NFC East champion, like my birds, so if I ever see you, you'll never buy a drink in this town. At least the first round's on me. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Inyang.
Careful, he has expensive tastes.
So Councilmember Mejia is not present. Councilmember Kellogg, Ward 6.
Mr. Mayor, well, this is something which is very complicated to me. But anyhow, may the Almighty Allah protect all of us and you for all what you have done for the community. And I hope everything will be okay. I don't know what to say. But thank you very much. Let me stop so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate all the kind words. I do want to say very straightforwardly that I am not done with my public service for this town, and I may be in your faces more than you want me to be over the years ahead. I made a commitment, if I am able, to be involved with the next redistricting, and I'm going to be involved with many things between this and now. I just need to step back at this time and deal with other parts of my life for some time. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to disappear at all. I'm just going to be stepping back a bit.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes.
If I could just briefly amend my report 1 second to say that, as I noticed she's here, that everything we said applies 100%, if not doubly so, to Ms. Wayland, and would like to thank her for all of her service to the town as well.
And it has been immense in ways that you don't know. So thank you for that. That brings us to public comments. And these are typically public comments on items that are not on the discussion items or rest of the agenda. And I see we have a honored visitor, Honorable Danielle Carter from Mount Rainier. She serves on the council there in Ward 1. And I'm not even sure what she's going to say to us this evening, but you have the floor, Ms. Carter.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I picked the best meeting to attend for Riverdale Park tonight. I'm watching the conversations about your budgeting and concerns with the new administration and stuff. You've given me a lot of thoughts to take back here to Mount Rainier and things you put on my to watch and maybe even to-do list. So thank you for that. And also, Mayor, I would like to tell you that I am absolutely gobsmacked at the immense empathy that I have noticed and recognized with you and your council. As you'll find out in my statement here in a moment, I came to this state as a paramedic and got ridiculed for, well, not ridiculed, but joked about for being misempathy. So to see fellow empaths like this has been a joy tonight. So you all have my respect, totally. Now to the reason that we're here. I do have something prepared to say, so I'm just going to go with that. Mayor and Council, my name is Danielle Carter, and I am a council member in the city of Mount Rainier. But before that, I was an EMS only volunteer with Prince George's County Volunteer Fire Department. In fact, EMS services is the reason I moved from my home state of North Carolina to Maryland 14 years ago this month. In early June of last year, the fire chief sent out letters to volunteer fire departments around the county notifying them that the career staff in their station would be either removed or severely reduced. At Station 55 here in Mount Rainier and Brentwood, we lost all staff except for a part-time ambulance that was to be there from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. After making a few contacts, that window was extended to 11 p.m. But that still left our community without fire suppression or a 24-hour ambulance. After experiencing 2 high-profile deaths, the county decided to send fire suppression engine and a 24-hour ambulance back to our station. But they did not restore services to the other stations, essentially leaving them all vulnerable to the same situation that we experienced. At the start of every shift, the Prince George's County Fire and EMS services are 25 men short. I will tell you that first responders have no problem doing overtime because that increases their pay. but everyone has their limits. This is a very large problem that is not just affecting the communities that are seeing the shortage in our stations, but the greater county as well. When a call comes out into an area that does not have staff at their station, they call in the closest station that has units available. That means that it is entirely possible for a unit from Laurel end up responding to Bowie or even Capitol Heights, and essentially leaving a void for response in that part of the county. Sadly, the relationship with the volunteers who have served the county for over 100 years has also been severely neglected, to the point where there are stations struggling not only to find and retain members, but to fix and replace their engines and ambulances. You do not need to look any further than right there in Riverdale and Riverdale Park. The county removed career members from Station 7 in Riverdale years ago, leaving only volunteers to cover that portion of the area. I know this firsthand because I ran calls out of that station for quite a while. Then there were years after that, they removed the career members from Station 13 in Riverdale Park. I think it's Riverdale East. Neither of these stations are fully staffed with volunteers and available to answer calls on a regular basis, if at all. The county is also using units from Montgomery County to answer calls, which then leaves areas of MoCo uncovered. So you see, this is not just a local problem. This is a systemic issue that is affecting our neighboring cities and counties. The Coalition to Support Prince George's County Fire and EMS is made up of elected officials, career and volunteer fire EMS members, and engaged residents in an attempt to bring out comprehensive changes to our county services that will benefit not only our individual municipalities, but the surrounding communities and even neighboring counties. We have written a letter and compiled a list of changes we feel are needed in order to restore the fire and EMS services in our local county to the level that not only we expect, but our residents and constituents deserve. We humbly ask that the council consider the email and list that we sent each of you, and ultimately decide to join in with other municipalities and leaders to sign on, either collectively or individually, so that when we submit this letter to the candidates for county executive, it will not only be seen as one of, but possibly the most important issue of this race and of the winner's term in office. Now, I'm here also with Stephen Leggin from Brentwood, but we are also available to take any questions either tonight via email or on the phone. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Does council wish to ask Ms. Carter questions here, or do we want to just bring this up under new business? What's the pleasure of the council? We usually just, Ms. Carter, we usually just accept public comments at this point and address them later.
And that's fine. That's all I expected to do was to address. That's all.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for your comments, and we will be looking into this in greater depth. I think you may know, if you've read our minutes, that we have actually been engaging with both the county fire department and our local volunteer department, and trying to see what we can do individually to improve service. And I think that joining with other municipalities and others in the county will be helpful in ensuring that that happens. Thank you. Are there any other public comments this evening? I don't seem to see any, so let's move on to work session discussion items. Item number 1, update on 2025 town election preparations.
Director Barnes, if you want to introduce that conversation.
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. We have with us tonight Chief Election Judge Sarah Zolad and Deputy Chief Election Judge Kate Kelly to provide an update on the preparations for the 2025 town election.
Hello, everybody. We've been working really hard getting the new timeline in order, and are currently reviewing materials from the county to make sure we have the right addresses for everybody. We have materials ready to go for the candidate packets, which should be going out shortly. Jessica has the specific details. We are in the need of a couple more election judges, but we have a couple that are ready to serve. We are working with some local people at high schools in the area to try to find an appropriate candidate for our Board of Elections, and have found out that the student government at several of the high schools in the area would be very interested in working with us. And we have yet to figure out exactly what that's going to look like, but we're really, really excited about that. I cannot think of something. I know there's more. Oh, the ballot box. Are we supposed to be talking about that yet?
We're gonna save that for next month.
That's okay.
Can't
Good
give it all up at
question.
one time.
Yes, that's just a teaser. Tune in next week. And the Board of Appeals, I think, Jessica, you can talk about that because that's not in my purview. And we're excited to have this new timeline because it's going to give us a lot more time to do outreach for voter education and get everyone excited. Kate, do you have anything to add?
I do not. I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has any.
Are there questions for Chief Election Judge Zolad or Ms. Kelly about the election preparations?
We've been well prepared for this.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We're excited.
Thank you so much. Moving on work session discussion items. Item number 2, fiscal year 2025 revenue update.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. Okay, so tonight's revenue report covers the month from July up to January 24th, 2025 for fiscal year 2025, 2024, 2023, fiscal year 2022, and shows a comparison of the 5 major revenue categories: real local taxes, licenses and permits, administrative fees, fines and forfeitures, and community safety programs. Wait, I don't think I see it actually on the screen right now. It should be, yeah, right there. Perfect. Thank you. So the first major category that we have for local taxes, it includes real estate taxes, personal property tax, local income taxes, and operating tax. So thus far for fiscal year 2025, we have a total of $7,273,300. This number does look to be considerably higher than fiscal year 24, 23, and 22. But that is mostly due to timing in the real estate 4001 category. We're currently at 100% of budgeted revenue. And for local taxes overall, we are at 95% of budgeted revenue. Some of the reasoning for that is we actually got word earlier than we typically do from MuniCap confirming that the TIF surplus budget that flows back to the town has been confirmed. So that has been included earlier than it has been in previous years. Typically, we've seen that around March or April. So we have captured 100% of what we had budgeted for real estate taxes thus far. So you do see a higher number for local taxes. In previous years, we were roughly around 70 to 80% of what we had budgeted for total local taxes. So while it looks like we have jumped up considerably for local taxes, again, it's really just a matter of receiving that revenue at an earlier date. The next major category is licenses and permits. We have a total amount for fiscal year 25 of 196,934. This number also higher than previous year. We were just at 155,000. But the major jump here is really just a collection of the multifamily rental licenses. We're currently at 99% of what we had budgeted there. So that explains why we are a bit higher than we were in the previous year. If you look 2023, we had captured 210,000 of that revenue. The year before 184,000. So it does fluctuate a little bit at this point in the year. Next major category is administrative fees. We have a total of $2,700, which is up a bit from the previous year. And then even the year before 2023 was a bit of an outlier. We had a lot of municipal infractions that had incurred. The next major category we have is fines and forfeitures. This includes vehicle impounds, parking citations, and police reports. At current amount that we have for 25 is 38,679 thousand. We've implemented a new parking citation program, so that has resulted in a larger amount of revenue collected for fiscal year 25. As you can see, just 400 collected at this time in 24, 1,200, 23, and 3,000 in fiscal year 2022. The last major category is community safety programs. This includes the speed camera revenue, known as Safe Speed for Students, line 4401. At this point, the total revenue collected is $1,082,651. So speed camera revenue is higher at this point as well, but this was expected with the additional cameras and the cameras running 24/7. So at this point, we're actually just at 50% of our total community safety programs revenue, which is where we expect to be at this point. So while revenue is higher, it was expected and it was budgeted to be higher. So it's not really a huge increase if we compare it to what was actually budgeted for fiscal year 25. So overall total income, we have a total of $8,594,264. Overall, the town is in a good financial position with the expectation that the budgeted revenue will be fully received by the end of the fiscal year. And as we mentioned in the previous presentation, this directly affects the revenue net expenditure amount. So it is good that we look to hit the expected budgeted revenue by the end of the year. And yeah, that concludes the revenue comparison for January. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Are there questions from the council?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Lingua, go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. Director Jones, the $1,082,000 that you're talking about, the $1,082,571 from the speed camera, you're saying 50% of the revenue. So you're saying that what so far has been collected is 50% of what was budgeted for that would be collected?
So the amount, the 50% that I mentioned, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, that's the total for the community safety programs. For the actual line item 4401, that's 65%. So we've received 65% of what we had budgeted for the Safe Speed for Students. But what's not shown on this report is we also had budgeted red light cameras. Now, the red light cameras have not been are not yet operational for fiscal year 25, and we had an amount budgeted there. So while we are at 65% for the speed cameras, we actually haven't collected any revenue yet that we budgeted for the red light camera, and that brings down the total community safety programs budget amount to 50%.
Okay, and there's no expectation that the red light cameras will be operational during this fiscal year.
That's incorrect, sir.
Okay.
Chief, can you speak to when we anticipate and where those cameras will be and that sort of thing?
Sure. Good evening. We anticipate by the end of March that the cameras will be functioning, and the first two locations are Route 1 and Queensberry Road and East West Highway at Taylor Road.
Okay.
And Chief, for my clarity, is it at the end of March where tickets will actually be issued, but they'll be functioning during March for a warning period?
So we anticipate sometime in February we'll start the warning period, hopefully.
Okay.
But that's anticipated.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Any additional council questions? Any public questions? Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Appreciate the report and the information. I'm glad to see we're doing well on our revenues for the year. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, item 3, renaming of 6401 51st Avenue.
Director Barnes, if you can introduce this conversation.
Certainly. Thank you. Good evening again, Mayor Thompson, members of the council and the community. No action is requested tonight. Instead, staff seek the opportunity to talk with the mayor and council regarding the recommended renaming of 6401 51st Avenue, which is commonly referred to now as the Boys and Girls Club. The building that is again referred to as the Boys and Girls Club was unused for many, many years. And during the last fiscal years, the mayor and council has authorized funding to improve and enhance the property. Although we do need some additional work to be done, the building is significantly improved and is currently being used for staff meeting space and much needed storage of a variety of items to include the election supplies. And outside of the building is our lovely community garden and food forest. So it's really an activated space. And staff are recommending that the mayor and council consider renaming it. As something certainly that the council would decide on, but recommended to rename the building from the commonly referred to as Boys and Girls Club, since that entity doesn't meet there anymore, obviously, or exist.
Thank you, Director Barnes. Council, any thoughts, any items you want to discuss or take under consideration? Councilmember Lingua, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I have an idea about that, about what it could be named. For a long-standing former resident who raised a family in that area and served this community many a year in various different ways. Like yourself. Legendary in her time, was responsible for a number of things being implemented in town. And that would be for naming it after Mary Donaldson. I don't think she lived very far from where that building is. Over on was she on Somerset, or was she on Sheridan as well?
She was on Sheridan, about 2 blocks, block and a half away from there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my suggestion.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingua.
Mr.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was just I don't have any immediate objections to the council member's suggestion. I'm sure, or I would guess this is the case for other members of the council too, who are similarly more recent transplants than a couple decades. I'm sure this person has a wonderful story and I'd like to hear more about it. I don't know that we need to take time tonight unless other folks think that's appropriate. But if there's anything that the council member could circulate on that, I would love to learn more.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Town Manager, well, Councilmember Inyang, do you wish to speak before the town manager?
It was just more a question around process in terms of, you know, what is sort of town staff expect or would recommend in terms of process of, you know, naming renaming the building. What might that look like?
Okay, well, perhaps the town manager can answer that in his comments. So.
So that's exactly where I was going to go. So this evening, our hope was to see whether or not a majority of the council was interested in naming the building. So that's step one, and there seems to be interest in renaming the building. And then from there, we would look at what that process would be, and then how the council would vet certain recommendations, and then how the council would ultimately decide. Sorry, I have a cat that's interrupting me here. And the mayor's laughing because we talked about this before the meeting. And despite my efforts, she just wants attention when yeah. Okay. But in terms of process, this could be handled a variety of different ways. We could put something out there to the community. That the council members could recommend folks as well, or names as well. But tonight, the real takeaway was for us, if you're interested, and then we'll come back to you with the proposed process, and then we can go from there.
Thank you. Super helpful. Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and we shouldn't have to continue to refer to it as the building formerly known as the Boys and Girls Club. So I think we're better off getting it. You know, I'm a big fan of renaming. So I'm curious about this process because I think there are a couple other things that we may want to rename so that they are, if you know, I don't have to go off of my soapbox, and I think the power of a naming and what it can do. So I'm glad that you brought this up. And I think whatever process we use would be good to document it or keep it in mind for maybe potential other opportunities as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Inyang. Any additional council discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Callan, go ahead.
I'm asking if anybody can make a suggestion, name suggestion for the building, or just to stick on Boys and Girls Club.
Well, I think the idea is that the Boys and Girls Club, which doesn't exist as an entity at this time, it could of course be revived, and that has happened in the past. But because it's not in use by the Boys and Girls Club, because the Boys and Girls Club doesn't exist, then it seems like a good idea to at least consider renaming it to something else. And so I think that's what's going on. And I think the issue is how to approach that process. And I believe that it sounds like the town staff will think of ways that everyone in town can make suggestions, and we can come to a conclusion on how to rename it. Does that answer your question?
Well, can I give my own suggestion, the name suggestion for the building?
Sure, go ahead.
Riverdale Convention Center.
Convention Center.
Yeah. Okay. Riverdale Convention Center.
Okay.
That's my own take.
Very good. Thank you for your suggestion.
Yeah.
Any additional comments on this item of business from the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Foe, go ahead.
I think, and again, this is no objection to Councilman Linguas at all. I'm interested in learning more. But I thought Doug McElrath might have some suggestion potentially of utilizing that space in name. I mean, he's a local historian, and he's on the 1856 project, and he just might have some ideas that we might want to mine out. Just an idea.
Thank you for that suggestion. It's a good one. Very good idea.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could just add one comment, I think it would be beneficial if we could arrange for the mayor and council to see the inside of the building, because it used to be quite a mess. and it still needs some work, but there's now 2 functioning restrooms. And as Director Barnes indicated, we're using it for meeting space and currently as well as some storage space. But it'd be good if we could arrange, and whether we do that in small groups or if we wait until it's we're going to have a walk and talk in not too many months. Perhaps we do a walk and talk in that area, and we can go inside and show the mayor and council the inside of the building and that.
It's amazing to me. The last time I saw it, just to hear you say that it's being used for meetings and has restrooms is quite an amazing upgrade. So I would be very interested in seeing that. Okay, thank you, council. Any public comments or thoughts on this this item of business? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next item of business, redesign of town flag.
So I'm going to ask Director Barnes to begin this discussion as well, because I think it flows naturally out of the redesign of the town seal. Director Barnes.
Certainly. No action is requested tonight. Staff are seeking some direction from the mayor and council regarding the redesign of the town flag. So the town underwent a process to redesign the town seal, and the process was pretty extensive. It created a committee, received a lot of public input. We hired the Neighborhood Design Center, selected an artist, and then we ended up with this gorgeous, beautiful town seal. And so in the process of replacing the old town seal with the new town seal, we found that the town flag is one of the major things that will need to be either redesigned or simply just replace the old town seal with the new town seal. So that is what we're asking the council tonight, how would you like to go about that? Would you like to go through a full process and redesign the whole flag, or would you be happy with simply replacing the old town seal with the new town seal? And so that's the question for this evening.
Thank you, Director Barnes. Council members, thoughts?
Mr. Mayor.
Ooh, I'm gonna give it to Councilmember Foe.
Listen, I could go either way on this, but the Newtown seal is tremendously beautiful. And for when I'm just speaking to this, I feel like a complete redesign to celebrate the beauty and the color that exists in that. I know it was an extensive process, and I don't want to have to put people through that again, but the result is so phenomenal that I feel like it deserves to be celebrated as an entity unto itself with a new flag. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm gonna take next comments in the order the hands went up. So Councilmember Smith was ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the best way forward is just to do a version of this with the new seal, where the old seal is, we spent a lot of time and a lot of money on developing the new seal. I think it was all worth it because our seal is amazing. And if there's, I don't know what the ology term is for the study of municipal seals, but if there's any nerds about that in the area, I'm sure they are salivating over our seal. So I think it would be great to put that on the flag of the town. My only question would be, I'm wondering if when this was designed, if there's any record of there being any symbolism for the colors in the background there. I assume there was not, and if there was, I assume it's completely an acceptable thing. But you know, as we have in recent years been evaluating many of our historical symbols, I think it's worth doing that check just to see if there's anything that would not be associated with the current town values today. Again, I'm skeptical that would be the case, but I think it's worth a check.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Inyang.
I was just looking up the term. I think it's vexology, but the study of flags and all that. I think so I agree that uh, as in-depth process as a town seal for the town flag may not necessarily be. I think the seal is uh, by design, detailed, everything sort of has a color, like has a meaning to it. And I think going through the process was sort of helpful because we knew that it's probably the most prominent symbol of the town. And so I think that process made a lot of sense. I know that like one of the things you shouldn't do is just put a town seal on a flag. It's like putting it on a bed sheet, it's just like, there's all these like, you know, best practices in terms of like flags. DC's flag is typically seen as like a great, standard bearer, very simple. You can see it, you can blow it up and see it, and it's sort of, what it is. Um, which then makes me lead towards I'm not in favor of just putting the town seal on a flag. I think we'd have to obviously change the colors because we're no longer using that type of blue. We're using more green. And so I don't know if it's as simple as just swapping the green out. But uh if there was a middle ground, I would say if it was possible to, rather than do a full public, committee and design of just like, can we trust some of the folks that we've already worked with, maybe part of the town seal process, and just if you were doing a flag, if you do flags, what would be some suggestions for a town flag and what might that look like? Um, and kind of maybe starting from there. And then if there are not sort of like clear, clear options. I think for me personally, it's if the flag is just going to be sort of, flying above the town center and that's it, then, that's one thing. If there's hope to sort of use, I see an opportunity that the flag as well as the seal could be used as something that is part of like a larger effort to try to show, you know, larger branding for the Riverdale Park and the greater community. I'm tired of being included in other people's greater community. And so if we want to start influence that, we might need to let people know that like, wow, whose flag is that? Whose colors are those? Oh, that's Riverdale Park. And so um, I think it may come down to what our aspirations are as a town. I personally think that these are things that we're not going to redesign this anytime soon. And so if we're going to do it, let's do it and not just do what I think the last time they did this was probably like, we have a town seal, let's just throw a flag on it and then call it a day. And so, but I also understand, like, I don't know how long it took for the town seal, but I was waiting for a while. So it, took years. And so I don't know if we can do that again, but I wouldn't want to just copy and paste.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Lingua, your mic is open, or you want to speak?
That it is.
Go ahead.
Yeah, rework the background and incorporate the new town seal.
Okay. Any additional council input? Any public comment? Okay, I'm going to weigh in here, and in a previous meeting where we were discussing legislative priorities, and I discussed this this podcast that I listened to called 99% Invisible that talked about the impact of striping on people driving faster than they should, perhaps on streets. And the person who runs that podcast is a gentleman named Roman Mars. He's quite an interesting person. I think he's a fantastic person, and he is a big fan of flag design. And it's a sort of one of his many obsessions. And the term that Councilmember Enyang was searching for was vexillological. So the North American Vexillological Association, say that 3 times fast, and you will also stumble over at least one of them, has 5 rules for designing a good flag. Rule 1, keep it simple. Rule 2, use meaningful symbolism. Rule 3, use 2 to 3 basic colors. Here's rule 4. A little bit dicey given the input so far. Never use text or seals. That is, rule number 4 out of 5. And rule 5 is be distinctive. And so, I think that Mr. Mars, the American Vexillological Association, would disagree. Until listening to too many episodes of 99% Invisible, then I'm not sure that I would have known that that this was an issue. But the point is that a seal is seen typically from up close. It's on a piece of printed material that you have in front of you, or the large version behind the council chambers, and a flag can be seen from very far away. And ideally, it's simple enough that you can tell whose flag it is when you're seeing it at the top of a pole and from far away. So I will put that out for further discussion, and I see that Councilmember Lingua has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question.
Yes, sir.
Does Mr. Mars live in Riverdale Park?
Mr. Mars does not.
Okay, well,
the council can come to their decision. I'm just saying that that probably if we did hire a consultant to do it and went through a multi-year process to redesign our flag, that they would have these principles and they would come up with something different than the suggestion of putting the seal on the middle of a flag.
okay.
So just for consideration.
Well, I mean, one of the things is like when we went through this whole process, one of the things we looked at was Town of Cheverly, who redesigned their seal, and all came up with something very straightforward, very simple, very nice, neat, all looks good. And I believe they also put it on their flag, and it looks good on their flag too.
But it's a much simpler seal than ours is. Much simpler.
But its seal, it's number 4 out of 5, Mr.
Yep.
Mayor. Number 4 out of 5.
Agreed. Mr. Town Manager.
So in trying to look for some consensus, Mr. Mayor, it seems that there's a desire from the council for the flag to be updated.
I think that I think that having the old seal as our official flag is
Yes, and
is not appropriate. I think everyone agrees to that.
And then there's a range of opinions from put the new seal on with these colors to put the new seal on with possibly different colors, and to having a different flag. If I can suggest maybe the staff take a look at those 3 options of putting the new seal on with the existing colors, putting the new seal on with different colors since the palette was changed, to redesigning the flag, and come back to you with some numbers and what the processes would look like for those 3 options. And then have in the meantime, you all can further develop your thoughts on there. Because I think if you were to poll the council tonight, you would have 2 for one position and perhaps 1 for each of the other positions. And that doesn't give us a clear way forward this evening. So if that pleases the council, we certainly can work in that direction and come back to you.
Okay, and I think that one question that was brought up, I believe, by Councilmember Yang was, but it may have been another one. Sure, you can pipe up and take credit for it. Is reaching out to the consultant who assisted us with the seal, and seeing if she has some thoughts or ideas in what that might look like. So,
certainly,
just as another thought.
So
Councilmember
we're
Smith.
reaching out to the Neighborhood Design Center.
That was actually my question, Mr. Mayor. When you say consultant, do you mean the artist or the consultant? Because
I would say the artist would be who we should reach out to, because I think that she understands a lot of what we were looking for in the seal and can So, you know, the bullet number 2, right under keep it simple, was use meaningful symbolism. And I think she understands the symbolism that would be seeking for at a fundamental level that would be hard to bring a new person up on. And
Okay.
and so just and she may come back and say, nope, don't do flags. Sorry, get somebody else. But you know, I think reaching out to her and seeing if she has thoughts or recommendations would be as part of this process as a possible direction, I think would be a good idea.
Yeah.
And then we'll work to perhaps bring that back at the end of February.
That sounds very good. Any additional council or public thoughts before we
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Callan, go ahead.
hence we have a new seal. We have to have a new background.
Mm-hmm.
That is because the seal is so perfect. So now we're going to find a new background for the seal where it can replace the old one. That's
okay.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like you are a member of the faction that thinks that perhaps adjusting minor adjustments, but with the seal, is a good direction to go. Okay. Okay, let's continue this discussion over the months ahead and see where we end up. Thank you so much. Next item on the agenda for this evening is holidays designated as non-collection days. This is for trash, recycling, etc. So
Yes, so Mr. Mayor, I'm going to pinch hit for Director Lewis this evening. So we have an existing contract with Jetta Trucking, and we specified in the contract these are the town holidays where we have no collection. And those are the same holidays that were in the contract with the former company, Bates Trucking. And I don't know the history, how far back those holidays were selected as non-collection days. What I do know is that there are other holidays, and they're listed here, the second list of bullet points, where we do have collection. And we get asked as staff by some residents, why? Why is there trash collection on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, or on President's Day, or Juneteenth, or Veterans Day? Why is that still occurring when on other holidays we don't offer service? And sometimes the easy answer is to point and say, well, the county landfill is closed on certain days and open on other days. But we actually still enjoy, I say enjoy, the services provided on days when the landfill is closed, because we're a small enough customer that the vendor is able to collect and then just store the waste in the trucks overnight and take them the next day. So that's the question for the council is, do we want to adjust this? There'd be no budget impact if we add days that we're not collecting in terms of any additional cost. It's really from a staff perspective, this is a statement, if you will, that is most appropriately made by the council in selecting what days this service would be suspended in recognition of a town holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. As you can see, you've already got a couple of hands up, and so let's dive in. Councilmember Foe, you had your hand up first.
Thank you to the staff for bringing this back up. I had questioned previously, and it's jogged my memory again. I always found it This year it happened again where we had refuse collection on Martin Luther King Day. I just historically thought that didn't make sense to me. It didn't align with my thoughts. Dr. King was fighting to protect the rights of refuse workers in Memphis when he was assassinated in 1968. Also, a lot of refuse collection done in our community previously with Bates, and now you see young Black men doing a lot of that work. I just believe that as we look at holidays that we can provide to service providers to us, we can look at specifically on this list, Martin Luther King Day and Juneteenth. And I think it would be a remarkable statement for inclusivity in our town and what it is that we value. And I think as we look at what opportunities we have to set into place what our values are, I think we need to look at those opportunities now more than ever and continue to do those things. So I think it's a great idea. Thank you, staff, for bringing it up, and I do support those two moves specifically. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And one of the reasons I initially raised my hand was to the point that Councilmember Foe made. So in that shout out and solidarity to the members, the brothers and sisters of American Federation of State County Municipal Employees, Local 1733 in Memphis, Tennessee, who were on strike when Dr. King was assassinated. I agree with making those non-collection days. One thing that I do want to flag, though, as someone who's recycling collection day, I think mine might be different than the rest of the town, or maybe the county straightened that out, but is Wednesday. And so this year we missed collection on New Year's Day or Christmas Day and New Year's Day, since those always fall on the same day. And that created a significant issue as alleys and sidewalks were piling up with boxes from Christmas gifts and wine boxes from New Year's Eve parties. I know I personally had to go to Home Depot and buy another recycling container. So if there's any way we could do collection on New Year's Day, actually, and understanding that there would be sort of a holiday pay or overtime cost associated with that, I think that's something we should explore. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Lingua.
I'm thinking, 3 out of the 4 MLK, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, Juneteenth, and Veterans Day. And as in terms of like the idea about dealing with recycling day, just seeing if county can schedule that. Should it fall on a Wednesday, on a day that they would have that it's either done day before or the day after.
I believe the issue brought up by Councilmember Smith is that those 2 days fall 1 week apart, and so his pickup, which is
Yeah.
on Wednesday, but ours is usually on Monday, and so having 2 Mondays in a row.
That's right, because his is part of the HOA.
The southernmost boundary. Well, I mean, it was recycling for us. Here we're, of course, about trash, but the same problem would occur if New Year's Eve or New Year's and Christmas were to occur
on a Monday,
the day of the week that the town gets trash pickup.
So you're okay.
And the twice a week trash pickup circumvents that issue, but the recycling pickup is
which is county, correct?
That's correct. So
Yeah.
we would
Well,
that we would have to deal with in a separate way, but nevertheless, the
word in with Eric and company.
the trash, the fact that we do have twice a week trash pickup circumvents that issue for this.
So yeah, it's like I said, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday observed, Juneteenth, and Veterans Day.
Okay. Any additional council thoughts on this question?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Enya, go ahead.
I think I appreciate Tom bringing this issue up. I get the same question every single time. Is there collections happening? I think it's clean to just say if the town is closed, then no collections happen, right? You know, just like if it's a holiday, then no collections happen. If it happens to fall on the same day, um, you know, I think I understand the like there is a symbolic, you know, which has been sort of well articulated that I completely agree with. But I think from the pragmatic of just is if the town is closed, if the town's on holiday, then we're not collecting trash. I think it's just an easy way to go about it than trying to parse through certain holidays. Just seems kind of over engineering it a little bit.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any Councilmember Lingway, I assume the hand is still up from previously, not that you wish to speak again. Thank you. Any additional council? I guess the council has mostly had a chance to speak. Any council or public comments on this this topic? Okay, there's something that that has come up in previous discussions of this, which is what happens to the actual workers should we adopt such a policy. And while I think we would ideally want the workers to also have a holiday, then that is not a given. That would be something that would be a probably uncomfortable negotiation with the vendor as to whether what they, you know, telling them that we would like to have no collection and for them to provide a holiday for the people who would be collecting. And so that's just something else to think about. But the overall issue of observing holidays and having the collection not occur on those days, it sounds like there's sort of general idea that we should adhere to that. Mr. Town Manager, do you have any thoughts?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share that having been in discussions over the years of trash collection once or twice a week, it's important to note that when one day of collection is not offered, there's twice as much work to do on the next day. And so just in keeping in line with that thought of the impact on the workers, they're lifting the same amount of weight that would have been split over 2 days. They're now lifting that on one.
People don't stop generating trash just because there's a holiday. In fact, often just the opposite.
Yes, you actually generate more.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we do, whether tonight or sometime in the near future, Mr. Mayor, if we can get clear direction from the council, so we can then coordinate with the vendor. President's Day is the next date coming up, I believe, right? That's mid-February, and then we'll have a break to Juneteenth.
So it sounds like no one is particularly upset about collection on President's Day. I don't know that I've gotten any complaints about that. So why don't we have council consider this question and bring it back up at a future meeting under unfinished business, perhaps at the legislative next week, and possibly continued to the February work session. Okay. Anybody have any comments before we move on to the next item? Any final comments? Okay. Work session discussion item number 6 is minutes, and there are an enormous number of minutes in the packet this time. I don't even remember if I can count as 6 or 7 sets of minutes. So as I always say, this is where history is written. The first draft of history is written in our minutes. And so please review them carefully and provide any corrections or changes. Councilmember Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on the subject of minutes, I'm just remembering that at the start of this meeting, I remarked that this current administration does not care about people, and I hope that will be reflected in this week's minutes.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to unfinished business. First item of unfinished business are charter amendments and code changes for deputy town manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So you basically have a very similar memo to the previous memos on this topic. But I did change one thing that is to note, and I think it's important to note. When we just started this discussion last June in a closed meeting about the potential of having this type of an organizational change, I spoke about it being in 2.5 to 3.5 years that we were planning for. We're now planning for 2.5 to 3.5 years. And when you look at the schedule of this and the implementation, and then of creating this opportunity, we're going to be down to 2 years, and from the 2 to 3 year mark. And for all the reasons previously discussed in terms of building the succession of our leadership internally to provide for stability when the staff side of the organization would go through significant change. I just think that's important. And so at the last meeting, I was asked about whether there was a legal conflict between section in Article 7, 702C3 and 4. And so I met with Mr. Sussman. We talked through that. He did not see a legal issue there, but we did add some language that he I added the language. He then reviewed it, and he's fine with it. So the document you have in front, or as an attachment to this tonight, outlines the change to Article 2, the change to Article 7 of the charter, and then the change to Chapter 2. Again, the mayor and I worked closely on this, going back and forth with language, and Mr. Sussman had the final say in terms of his review, and he sent me the final the other day, and I'm willing to, or I'm here to take any questions, and we're willing to make any changes that the council so direct. But I would like to begin the introduction process. As it says later in this memo, whoever's controlling the screen, if you can go to the next page, it outlines what the time schedule would be. Director Barnes, can you make it move to the next page, please? Thank you. Well, I guess it was right at the bottom of that. So if you go up a little bit, right there. So the introduction on the 3rd, then we have the advertising process, and then a public hearing in March, and then adoption, and then the effective date of the ordinance we would run to be the same as the effective date of the charter amendment. So you're looking at May 13th if we follow this schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Before moving on to council discussion, I'll just mention that my review of the final product, final proposed legislation is, I find it perfectly acceptable. I have no more concerns. So with that, council, thoughts, comments?
I'm fine with this schedule.
Okay. Do you have any concerns with the legislation?
No, I read it over. It's fine.
Okay. Any other council members with concerns, thoughts?
So, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, staff will, we still need to work for the actual product. I mean, this is the standalone, so things will be formatted and that differently when you see it next.
Sure. Understood. Okay, if there are no, then we will anticipate introduction, and I hope that a council member will be happy to introduce it next week at the February legislative. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay.
And thank you all very much on this. If Mr. Mayor, if I can just add that this is an organizational change, and I appreciate your support.
Of course, we all want to have a stable, effective, and sustainable organization, and so this helps with that very much. Next item under unfinished business is discussion of compensation of elected officials. This is a topic that Councilmember Inyang wished to bring up this evening. So, Councilmember Inyang.
Thank you. There's no presentation on this. It actually was, several months ago, almost a year ago. I'm not exactly sure when. I think the conversation was first brought up around elected officials' salaries for the mayor and council. And one of the things that I know personally why I thought it was important to bring up was because, hearing about the salary being a potential barrier for civic engagement for certain parts of for certain populations. And then when we started digging into it, this idea that the last time it was updated was June of 2013. And I'm very much aware of the fact that, this is not a politically favorable thing to do. People being able to sort of like vote to increase their salaries. I think there's a reason why a sitting council can't increase their salaries for the own council that they're in. And so we discussed this months ago about options. And so I did some digging and ran some numbers. This idea of, in a perfect world, I think the salary would be set. It would be sort of like tied to the consumer price index. And so as things change, it would sort of automatically do it. But talking to, the town manager and looking at other precedents, towns that do this well, it is sort of written to their charter, right? I think Gaithersburg, was Gaithersburg? Maybe Gaithersburg was like an example of, in their charter, every June or July 1st, it'll be adjusted by CPI. And as we just saw in that last, on the last item, charter changes take a long time. They're sort of drawn out process, as it should be. And the unique thing about this is that any changes that we do has to be done in place. Otherwise, you have to almost wait another 2 years for another council in order for them to take advantage. So it's been, more than 10 years, 12 years since the last time this has been looked at. And so just even doing numbers in terms of like what would make sense, based off my calculations, I did this off of like, assuming this was from June, but I'm not sure, maybe 2013, it might even be different, but essentially just counting for inflation and capping it that there's no more than sort of 3% on the high end. I think 2 years ago, inflation went up 7%. And so in a year like that, it would only be capped at 3%. The mayor salary, based off of the 2013 or 2014 numbers would be, instead of $12,000, would be like $14,900. And council salaries would go from $6,000 to about $7,500 or so.
Those are annual salaries.
Annual salaries, yes. Annual salaries, yes. And so I think my suggestion, and would love to have a discussion here, is one, if the council sort of agrees that it's important that this is a change worth doing, that we probably would want to do this in stages, in the sense that there's a path leaving the charter the way it is, and making maybe a town code adjustment so that the salary is at a level that we think is appropriate. And then if a future council wants to go in and go through the charter amendment process to sort of have that tie to CPI, that we can, sort of do that, with the next council, since we won't have enough time to do a charter amendment after getting everything done. We'd run out of time, and it's not something we'd want to just rush. And so I guess twofold in the conversation. One, people think this is a good idea, worthwhile having, and then two, sort of essentially keeping the salaries the same, just adjusted for inflation, to sort of be updated for 2025 numbers, is sort of the second thing. And then I think there's what we'll lean on the town manager and maybe the mayor in terms of like what the process would be if we chose to go that path in terms of, I think, a code adjustment. And I know, John, we talked about the idea of, even potentially, it's odd that the town code has salaries in it. Maybe that's the cleanest way to do it in the short term. Or I think a more ideal, cleaner way might be passing an ordinance that has language in the town code, sort of like referencing the ordinance, since that's what the town charter is asking for. But I would say that's kind of like the third question. And so those are my thoughts. Happy to answer questions if people have questions in terms of like how I came to those discussions, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Smith, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I fully support my colleague's proposal here. I like the idea of raising it to appropriate level and then indexing to inflation through the CPI or whatever necessary. And I commend my colleague from the Fourth Ward for raising this. As he notes, it's not a very popular position for members of a body to devote time to talking about raising their own salary. And I am very grateful for the fantastic representation that I think we have gotten from my colleagues across the town on the council. But it's a fact that historically it has been more difficult to recruit candidates from the areas of town that have lower socioeconomic indicators. And I think that's directly attributable to the fact that, it is the demand of time to serve in this body. And if you pay folks $500 a month, you will continue to get representation that can afford to do the job for $500 a month. I can afford to do the job for $500 a month. If we increase this pay, I would be happy to write a check back to the town for whatever that is. But we have people in our town, a large segment of our town, that could not afford to do this job for $500 a month, and those folks deserve representation too. So wholly support this initiative from my colleague in the Fourth Ward, and look forward to debating it more and supporting it and coming up with a proposal that we could vote on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Additional council discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Foe, go ahead.
My colleague did this when he couldn't sleep. I think that's hysterical to see the way that his mind works. That's what I said. This is what you do when you can't sleep. This is always, again, like the previous council member said, it's scary to dialogue something about this. But I think when you see the math behind it and you're talking about a raise potentially that would have been $1,500. I don't know. I haven't voted once for a raise in 8 years. And I don't necessarily see it as bad policy, specifically for the reasons cited by Councilmember Smith, by Councilmember Inyang. So I look forward to debating it, and I plan on supporting it.
Okay. That's 3 council members who are in support. Any additional council comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Callan, go ahead.
Yeah, since last year I was on back on this, but I'm so happy. I have 3 of my colleagues who have seen where I'm coming from. So, well, we're in line. Thank you.
Okay, so based on my understanding of Councilmember In Yang's discussion, and he and I discussed this offline as well. I think that the appropriate direction to go, given the impending change of council, is to simply update the salaries, just update the numbers as they appear in code, and perhaps following the guidelines that Councilmember Enyang discussed of adjusting for inflation, but capping it at some level. And he had some new numbers, and so those would be probably a good starting point. And then putting off the more complicated process of indexing future increases to the consumer price index. There are multiple ones that are generated by the federal government. It seems like a reasonable direction to go. So I would suggest to ask staff to generate draft legislation for that to appear next week, and perhaps the number, you can work with Councilmember Enyang to adjust the numbers. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
That brings us, and we're still in the work session. We have a special, don't forget it, guys. Is new business. Are there any items of new business? Are there any other items of unfinished business before we move forward? Okay, then that's the end of our agenda, and we don't need a vote to adjourn because it's a work session. But let's move immediately into the special legislative meeting, which I'll call to order at 10:21 p.m. Members of the council, you have an agenda before you. I need to know if there are any amendments required to the agenda or if you have any stated conflicts of interest for any agenda items. Hearing none, seeing no microphones unmuted, I will assume not. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Who had the second? I saw the motion was Councilmember Foe, second by Councilmember Smith. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Any discussion of the motion to approve the agenda as submitted? Any public comments? Hearing none, I will move to a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Aye.
Councilmember Enyang,
Aye.
Councilmember Kellogg,
Aye.
and I abstain. The motion passes 5-0. That brings us to public comments. Are there any public comments this evening? Looks like members of the public may have all left for the evening, so let's continue. Legislative action items is next on the agenda. First item, may I please have a motion to authorize the town manager to sign an agreement with AJE Networks LLC for an amount not to exceed $248,540.25 for Council Chambers Camera Project, CIP Project 14GG02.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion by Councilmember Enyang, seconded by Councilmember Foe. May we have staff presentation on the proposal?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have Mr. Newman Hader with us this evening, as well as Director Barnes to answer any questions about this. Newman, if you want to give an overview of where we are.
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Staff would like to request mayor and council approval for the town manager to sign the agreement with AJE Networks LLC for an amount not to exceed $248,540.25. It includes 5% contingency for the installation of this project. As presented by the town staff on January 6, 2025 legislative meeting, the planned improvements to the council chambers camera system aim to enhance meeting accessibility, broadcasting capabilities, and hybrid meeting functionality. The upgraded system will enable live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and town's website, providing residents with greater access to town meetings through multiple platforms. Town staff also identified in the last meeting a funding gap of $52,768.25. Staff would like to propose a temporarily advancing funds from the restricted PEG funds account. While this will result in a temporary overdraft, the CIP budget will cover the gap until future PEG funds are received. I believe that's the next financial year. This approach ensures the town continues to improve services for residents. Regarding the next step, staff recommends that mayor and council authorize the town manager to finalize the agreement with AGE Networks LLC for an amount not to exceed $248,540.25, ensuring the council chamber camera project remains on schedule. Thank you. With this, I conclude this presentation. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter. Council members, any questions or comments? Councilmember Lingua, I see your microphone is open.
Yes, $250,000 for a camera system. That must be one heck of a camera system.
Yes.
I mean, reading this over, I mean, I just came away thinking this thing must be phenomenal.
And as you know, the town went through a proposal process, careful proposal process, multiple rounds, as I remember. Is that correct, Mr. Town Manager?
It is, sir.
And this was the bid that came out as being responsive and the least expensive. And I agree with you. It's shockingly large. I believe it's similar to what College Park paid for their camera system. Is that also correct, Mr. Town Manager?
Director Barnes, please weigh in here.
College Park spent approximately $400,000 for their council chambers AV system.
And just to add there, it did not include the maintenance when they did that.
Okay. So yeah, I agree with you, Councilmember Lingua. It seems like a lot of money, but it also seems to be what the going rate is.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment?
Please do.
So I agree, this is a lot of money for this. And if we were able to do it less expensively, that'd be wonderful. I think it's important, though, that we recognize that the funds that are being used for this project are funds that can only be used for this type of project. And so the public education and government funds, these are capital dollars for something like this. This project meets the requirements, the restrictions on those dollars. And the town's been not spending our PEG funds for years and saving up those dollars. And we had talked about perhaps at some point maybe we'd have a TV studio if we go back to that discussion about 6601 Baltimore. And PEG funds could be used for something like that, the capital dollars. Anything that supports the broadcasting of public education and government. But we cannot use these monies for operating. We can't use these monies for anything other than capital dollars related to this. That's what these funds are for. And because I'm going to be straight up, I had a hard time swallowing this number, and Director Barnes knows from all of my questioning, it seems high. And that's why I asked her to reach out to College Park since they had recently put in a system. And I've shared with the mayor, I'm stuck in 1980 on some of the things. No, I am. I still think if you spend over $100,000 on a house, that's too much money. This apparently is the going rate and for a quality system. And so with all that, I think it makes sense to move forward with this. And I had to step away for a minute, but with that gap, Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith have discussed this with our auditors. And we're able to, as PEG funds come in, pay ourselves back.
That's good to hear.
Okay,
Are
thank you.
Are there additional council comments? I have one more myself, but I'll let the council go first.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Smith?
Councilmember Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Lecition, you mentioned that we had trouble finding things to spend these funds for in the past. Am I wrong on that?
No, I don't believe I said we had trouble. I said we were saving up the funds.
Oh, okay.
And at some point it made sense to put in a new system. But we're always trying to get the renovation of Town Hall done, and that project was decades in the making. And so now it made sense to spend these dollars on a capital project like this.
Understood. Thank you for that correction. Do you have a ballpark for how many years it took for us to accumulate the amount that we do have?
Quite a bit. Mr. Jones, are we receiving about $18,000 a year in PEG funds?
Yes, roughly that amount.
Okay. So, and then now, just as a reminder to the council, we also recently had signed that agreement with Comcast. And we've yet to receive any PEG funds from Comcast. So this is all money that's come in from Verizon. And so we're waiting on the Comcast money to come in. And we made a recent inquiry through the INET attorney, Sue Ellen Ferguson, to find out how long it's going to take and the process. So we start seeing money there. My guess is that we'll start to see at least 10,000 coming from there. And so the amount will increase, and then we'll start saving again. And that hopefully will help us build up funds over the next several years. So if we move forward on 6601, we'd have some money to use towards that capital expense.
Understood. Thank you for that response, Mr. Town Manager. Yeah, I hear you that this was sort of an intentional savings thing, but at the same time, in that amount of time, nothing came up where we had to say, oh, we have to spend money on this thing now, and we have this source of it that can be spent that way. So it continued to accumulate. So
yes,
yeah, I hear it. I'm there. But this seems like an appropriate expenditure for this project. So thank you for bringing this to the staff for bringing this to us.
Councilmember Foe, did you wish to speak?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. So the one thing that I wanted to say, are there any other council comments? And are any members of the public in attendance? I don't see anyone. Councilmember Calhoun, do you wish to say something?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, this money is too huge. I don't know. Is this an investment for the I don't know how they call this man? What is his name? The guy that was bringing this project to us. Because if they are investing, we are not supposed to give them money. Let them invest. When the camera start making money, they can retrieve their money from there. We can take about $248,000 and some to spend it on this camera. I don't know.
So it's camera plus AV system, and it will belong to us at the after installation. It's not that it belongs to anyone, and we can.
Well, I don't know, because this money is too much. Let's look into it. It's too much.
And Mr. Mayor, may I ask a clarifying question for Director Barnes? or Newmont to provide. So it's a camera system. It's a audio system, has translation services. But this is also our broadcasting system for our 2 cable channels, right?
Yes, and it is a camera system. It has just to mention a few features. So it has monitors for each council member and mayor, 21.5-inch monitors for each one. And then there's a 65-inch LG monitor for audience, so they can see the presentations. It has specialized gooseneck microphones with desktop bases, handheld microphones. Then there's speakers for even sound distribution. So it's a lot more than just cameras. And like you said correctly, it streams and records. There's projector as well in the system. So yes, it provides you integration, hybrid meetings capability, closed captioning services, translation services, and of course, it's a very user-friendly system, and privacy and security as well. So just to kind of give a background, it's more than just a few cameras.
And it will broadcast whatever we're recording and other things on the town's 2 cable channels.
Yes, I believe so.
And if I may also add, this also includes all of the electrical work for this project. So that this is a full package deal that this vendor can provide all of the services versus us having to go out and get an electrician to install a system that isn't ours. So this was a really good package for us. I think we all agree that it was expensive, but it is also an investment. And we certainly could not have put in an AV system that did not have the accessibility features. It's not consistent with the town's values, and there's a cost to that.
Okay, I will add my comments that we have not had a meeting in town hall in many years, and my memories grow a little bit faint, but I remember that we in the entire 16 years that I've been on this side of the dais, and for 10 years before that, when I was in the audience, there's never been decent audio. It's always had feedback problems, it's had insufficient volume problems, it's had stability problems, and it has interfered with the interface between the town and the public, that we did not have good audio. People have, I can recall people complaining about the audio in town hall before the year 2000. And when we started talking about the municipal renovations and the upgrades to the town hall and what we would do, then I always said, when we first started talking about that, but I always said, we have to have a good audio visual system, so that we can ensure that we are communicating with the town residents. I can't remember how many meetings I was in where somebody would get a phone call from a member of the public who was watching over cable saying, I can't hear you. There's no audio coming through. And that conceivably is it's inconsistent with our desire to involve the public as much as we can. So yeah, I'm not happy about this. I'm a little bit concerned that, the existence of the PEG funds, that there are companies that know that they are there and that they make a lot of money by installing systems like this. But it doesn't seem to be that there's much of a market for it outside of municipalities, perhaps. And so it may be more than is reasonable, but trying to do it ourselves, we're going to end up with another system that would not be usable. And I believe that from talking to my colleagues in College Park, that they are extremely happy with having their new functional system. And so I trust that if we spend these monies, that we will all end up in a similar place. I probably said more than I should have as chair, but we can go. Are there any additional comments, discussion of this item? I don't see any microphones. I don't see any hands up. I've lost my agenda. There we go. Okay, I will do a roll call vote given that there's no more discussion. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua,
Hi.
Councilmember Inyang,
Aye.
Councilmember Kellon.
Aye.
And I abstain. The motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda, legislative action item 2, motion to authorize the town manager to sign a 5-year agreement with AJE Networks LLC for maintenance of the council chambers camera system. May I please have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion by Councilmember Inyang, seconded by Councilmember Smith. It flashed very quickly, so I trust that's the case.
Foe.
It was not.
Oh, okay, Foe. May we please have a presentation with the motion on the floor?
Mr. Newman Hater.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor and Council. Town would like to request the Mayor and Council to authorize the town manager to execute a 5-year maintenance and service agreement with AGE Networks LLC for the council chambers camera system. AGE Networks LLC was selected to upgrade the council chamber camera system and offers optional renewable year-to-year maintenance and service agreements, providing flexibility to the town. This is one question that Mayor asked in the last meeting. So yes, we are not tied into a 5-year contract with them, and it will be a year-to-year agreement. The proposed agreement would begin on July 1st, 2025. Even though the installation would be before that, we'll still be getting the agreement, or the payments would be done from starting July 1. It includes provisions for cancellation by either party with 30 days notice. The maintenance and service agreements includes closed captioning, as I mentioned in the previous presentation, and also bi-directional interpretation services between English and Spanish. Captions will be both visible in person and to online attendees, furthering the town's commitment to inclusiveness and accessibility. The annual cost per agreement as follows. Starting year 1, it starts from 21,845.50, and to the year 5, it goes up to 27,578. This is an increase of 6%. The total cost for the 5-year term is $123,140.50. Next steps. Staff recommend that Mayor and Council authorize the town manager to sign the 5-year maintenance and service agreement with AGE Networks LLC for the council chamber camera system. And just to add here, all the tickets, there's no cap on the tickets. So if there's any issues, those will be resolved without any cap. So yeah, I mean, if there's any issues, it's unlimited tickets.
Thank you, Mr. Hader. And just to emphasize this, these maintenance services include real-time bi-directional English-Spanish translation for the meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, it does, but we do have to let them know in advance our agenda. So if they have to switch, they can. Yes.
Okay. Okay, Council. Any discussion of the motion that's on the floor?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Inyang, go ahead.
No, appreciate this, and I appreciate the work to be able to find opportunities to get out of the agreement if necessary for whatever reason. I think that was the only hiccup I had on this, and so I know these things are in some ways the maintenance and service costs are required, right? And you can't really, but if they're negligent in some way, the flexibility of being able to get out, hopefully, incentivizes them to give us the best possible service at any point in time. So I appreciate the work that was done to negotiate this.
Thank you. Any additional council discussion? Any public comments? there are any members of the public? Don't see any. Okay, I'll go immediately to a roll call vote then. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua, Councilmember Lingua,
I said aye.
I didn't hear it. I may have had a little network blip. Councilmember Inyang,
Aye.
Councilmember Kellon,
Aye.
and I abstain. The motion passes 5-0. That brings us to agenda item 3, which is a motion to take us into closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom this public body has jurisdiction, or any personnel matter that affects one or more specific individuals. This is General Provisions Article 3-305B1. May I please have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, is that correct?
Yep.
I'm taking notes here. Seconded by Councilmember Inyang. Is there any discussion of the motion? Okay. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua.
Aye.
Thank you for that clear vote. Councilmember Inyang
Aye.
and Councilmember Kellon.
Aye.
I abstain. And Councilmember Mejia is absent. I have to actually type Mejia here. So the motion passes and we enter into closed session at 10:46 p.m.